everybody. It's Miss Monet and Lizzie, and today we're going to be reading you a couple of our favorite stories. So first, we're going to start with The Tale of Mr. Jeremy Fisher, which is by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there was a frog called Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He lived in a damp house amongst the buttercups at the edge of a pond. The water was all slippy-sloppy in the larder and in the back passage. But Mr. Jeremy liked getting his feet wet. Nobody ever scolded him, and he never caught a cold. He was quite pleased when he looked out and saw large drops of rain splashing in the pond. "I will get some worms and go fishing and catch a dish of minnows for my dinner," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. "If I catch more than 5 fish, I will invite my friends, Mr. Alderman Tortoise and Sir Isaac Newton. The alderman, however, eats salad." Mr. Jeremy put on a mackintosh and a pair of shiny galoshes. He took his rod and basket and set off with enormous hops to the place where he kept his boat. The boat was round and green, and very like the other lily leaves. It was tied to a water plant in the middle of the pond. Mr. Jeremy took a reed pole and pushed the boat out into open water. "I know a good place for minnows," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. Mr. Jeremy stuck his pole into the mud and fastened his boat to it. Then he settled himself cross-legged and arranged his fishing tackle. He had the dearest little red float. His rod was a tough stalk of grass, his line was a fine long white horsehair, and he tied a little wiggling worm at the end. The rain trickled down his back, and for nearly an hour he stared at the float. "This is getting tiresome. I think I should just like some lunch," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He punted back again amongst the water plants and took some lunch out of his basket. "I will eat a butterfly sandwich and wait till the shower is over," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. A great big water beetle came up underneath the lily leaf and tweaked the toe of one of his galoshes. Mr. Jeremy crossed his legs up shorter, out of reach, and went on eating his sandwich. Once or twice something moved about with a rustle and a splash amongst the rushes at the side of the pond. "I trust that is not a rat," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. "I think I had better get away from here." Mr. Jeremy shoved the boat out again a little way and dropped in the bait. There was a bite almost directly. The float gave a tremendous bobbit. "A minnow! A minnow! I have him by the nose!" cried Mr. Jeremy Fisher, jerking up his rod. But what a horrible surprise! Instead of a smooth, fat minnow, Mr. Jeremy landed on little Jack Sharp the stickleback, covered with spines. The stickleback floundered about the boat, pricking and snapping until he was quite out of breath. Then he jumped back into the water, and a shoal of other little fishes put their heads out and laughed at Mr. Jeremy Fisher. And while Mr. Jeremy sat sadly on the edge of his boat, sucking his sore fingers and peering into the water, a much worse thing happened. A really frightful thing it would have been if Mr. Jeremy had not been wearing a mackintosh. A great big, enormous trout came up, ker-plop, with a splash, and it seized Mr. Jeremy with a snap. "Oi, oi, oi!" And then it turned and dived down to the bottom of the pond. But the trout was so displeased with the taste of the mackintosh that in less than half a minute it spat him out again, and the only thing it swallowed was Mr. Jeremy's galoshes. Mr. Jeremy bounced up to the surface of the water like a cork in the bubbles out of a soda water bottle, and he swam with all his might to the edge of the pond. He scrambled out on the first bank he came to, and he hopped home across the meadow with his mackintosh all in tatters. "What a mercy that was not a pike," said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. "I have lost my rod and my basket, but it does not much matter, for I am sure I should never have dared to go fishing again." He put some sticking plaster on his fingers, and his friends both came to dinner. He could not offer them fish, but he had something else in his larder. Sir Isaac Newton wore his black and gold waistcoat, and Mr. Alderman Tortoise brought a salad with him in a string bag, and instead of a nice dinner of minnows, they had a roasted grasshopper with ladybird sauce, which frogs consider a beautiful treat, but I think it must have been gross. The end. So again, you guys, that was the tale of Mr. Jeremy Fisher by Beatrix Potter. Okay, so let's see what book we got next, Lizzie. Okay. So next we have The Haunted Forest by G. Warren Schloat Jr. Written and illustrated. The Haunted Forest. The path straight ahead went through the haunted forest. This was the shortcut to Grandfather's house. The path to the left went around the forest. This was the long way to Grandfather's house. Andy had stood at this fork in the path many times, and he had always decided to go the long way around. Today he hummed to himself as he wondered which path to take. Then he said, "I'll go the long way again." He started down the path to the left when a shiny new basketball came bouncing out of the forest. Andy caught the ball with one hand. To return it, he moved a step or two into the forest. It was so dark, Andy could hardly see the trees, but the tree right in front of him seemed to make a motion that said, "Right over there, right over there." Swish! The basketball tree reached out and flicked the ball from Andy's hands. "Thanks," 5 voices said together. "Thanks for returning the ball." As Andy turned to leave the forest, he heard a familiar sound. Ring-a-ling-ling! It was a telephone bell from deeper in the forest. It rang, and nobody answered it. Andy ran deeper into the forest to find the telephone. "The forest returns a favor for a favor," said a deep, hollow voice as Andy put the telephone receiver to his ear. "Just step down the path and help yourself. You'll find a favor in one of 3 different flavors. Chocolate, pistachio, or vanilla," offered the happy ice cream tray. "Gee," thought Andy as he licked a vanilla ice cream cone, "this haunted forest is a mighty friendly place after all. I'm going to take the shortcut all the time." Andy now moved through the forest with more confidence. As he finished his ice cream cone, he came upon a tree with hanging bunches of marbles. This was his favorite game. He won 2 blueies, 3 whiteys, and a brand new shooter. "An apple a day keeps the doctor away," said the next tree along the path. "Be my guest and have a bite." The bite was delicious. "You should have been here yesterday," the tree continued. "I gave out bananas and celery and sugar cane. But now it's the musical hour. Lend a hand with this saw," the tree commanded, "and we'll soon be listening to a band." "Some tree," puffed Andy as he worked one end of the saw. "It grows something different every day." Andy was right. There instantly grew in place of the apple tree a strange combination of musical instruments. Then together this noisy band began to play. Andy lay down and relaxed. He moved only his feet to keep time with the beat of the music. When the music stopped, Andy continued on his way. At the bottom of the hill he found a bubble tree. It blew not 1 or 2, but 5 bubbles of varying sizes. As Andy peered into one of the pipes, a large bubble popped right around him and picked Andy up. It took him higher and higher and higher until he floated right up to the top branches of a pair of skinny oak trees. The oaks did not ask Andy which way he was going, but said, 144 feet to the next stop. We can make it in 12 giant steps because we stride exactly 12 feet at a time. At the end of 12 times 12 giant steps was the totem pole tree. The oaks placed Andy neatly on top of the old bald eagle. "Hey," screamed the old bald eagle, "get off before you put your foot in my eye." Before Andy could climb down, a bird flying by chirped, "My pals and I will get you down." And they did. It was easy as swinging on a maypole because this was the maypole tree. Andy swung around and around the maypole tree until he was down on the ground, and he was out on the road to Pleasantville. Andy had gone through the haunted forest. As he turned for a last look, all of the trees shouted, "So long, come back soon." "And here are some things to remember us by," shouted the trees. Yes, almost every tree Andy had met sent him a present. Stilts, marbles, saxophone, drum, bubble pipe, apple, basketball, and another ice cream cone. Andy put the marbles in his pocket, beat the drum, blew on the saxophone, bounced the basketball, blew bubbles from the pipe, licked the ice cream cone, took a bite from the apple, jumped on the stilts, and continued on the road to Pleasantville. So again, this book was called The Haunted Forest, and it's a really fun book, especially if you like walking in forest and any books about nature. This one is a lot of fun, and the illustrations are really retro, really old and interesting. So yeah, it's The Haunted Forest. Okay, so the final book we have today, previously I read The English Roses, and this is the sequel picture book, The English Roses Too Good to Be True by Madonna. Okay. The English Roses Too Good to Be True. If you hadn't heard of the English Roses by now, then you are either living under a rock, living on the moon, away with the fairies. If you fit the description of A, B, or C, then I am happy to clue you in to what the rest of the world already knows. The English Roses are 5 girls named Nicole, Amy, Charlotte, Grace, and Bianna. They're best friends who do everything together. Dancing, homework, ice skating, picnics, sleepover parties. Oh, fiddlesticks, if I go on and on, then I won't get to the rest of the story. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, the English Roses. Well, there was a time when they were 4, not 5. It was all because of the big green monster. She came waltzing into their lives totally uninvited. You see, the other girls treated Bianna as if she did not exist because they thought she was too pretty and too smart and too perfect. But what she really was too lonely. Fortunately, their friendly fairy godmother made them invisible with magic fairy dust, and they were able to observe Bianna's life without being noticed. What they found was very far from perfect. They realized that they had misjudged Bianna and decided to stop acting like silly, selfish ninnies and be her friend. So Bianna became an English Rose too, and they all lived happily ever after. Or did they? Well, as you know, once you work out one problem in your life, another one comes along and tries to throw a bucket of worms in your pants. This is where our story begins. It was the first day of school, and the English Roses were excited to be starting 5th grade. They rushed to get there on time, carrying their new book bags and wearing their favorite outfits. Their new teacher's name was Miss Fluffernutter. She had a pile of gray fluff on her head that had a mind of its own. Her outfits never seemed to match, and she was not what you call fashionable, but everyone loved her because she was beautiful on the inside. She also had a reputation for making work fun. During cleanup, she had been known to put on funky music and encourage the class to dance while they worked. Sometimes she would jump on her desk and burst into song. The English Roses couldn't wait to have fun with her. After the bell rang, Miss Fluffernutter began to call out the students' names. She came to a name that no one had heard before, Dominic de la Guardia. It sounded like a poem or a symphony. A voice with a foreign accent said, "Present." Everyone turned around. Have you ever seen anything that was TGTBT? Well, that's what Dominic de la Guardia was. Too good to be true. Every girl's heart skipped a beat. The Roses couldn't wait to discuss him during their lunch break. Before you could say pumpernickel sandwich, Nicole, Amy, Charlotte, Grace, and Bianna were all giggling about the new boy in class. He must be from Spain, said Charlotte. I think he's dreamy, said Amy. I wonder if he's from an important family, asked Nicole. Grace scrunched up her face and said, he's not all that, but you could tell she liked him too. I wonder if he's nice, asked Bianna. He looks nice, said Amy. Well, looks aren't everything, said Bianna. The girls stopped for a moment and nodded their heads in agreement. Wait a second, hadn't the English Roses already learned that valuable lesson? Well, smarty pants, sometimes a lesson needs to be learned more than once. Now stop interrupting me. Dominic turned out to be an exchange student from Spain. He would be living for a year with the Ferguson family, Amy's neighbors. Not only was he nice, but he was also smart and he had excellent manners. He was also a great soccer player. Just thought I'd mention it. He was kind of, well, perfect. Oops, there's that word again. That scary, intimidating, impossible to live up to word. Perfect. The English Roses were in a constant state of competition with one another. They didn't do it on purpose. They didn't mean to like the same boy. They just couldn't help themselves. Of course, they all had their own unique way of showing it. Nicole helped Dominic with his homework even when he didn't need it. Charlotte started to learn Spanish on the computer at home and was always saying annoying things like hola, gracias, and mucho gusto to everyone. Amy spent even more time in front of the mirror than usual, choosing the perfect outfit and futzing with her hair. And Grace talked about sports incessantly. She even carried a soccer ball in her bag, just in case he wanted to play. The only person who didn't seem interested in Dominic was Bianca. She was too busy worrying about her papa and getting all her work done. She didn't have time to moon over good-looking boys. One day, Miss Fluffernutter announced that the fall dance was only a week away. As 5th graders, they were finally old enough to attend. She asked if anyone in class would like to stay after school and help make decorations for the gym where the dance would be held. The English Roses all raised their hands at the same time, because that's what best friends do. They think alike. Well, at least most of the time. Dominic de la Guardia raised his hand too. The English Roses all sighed with approval. After school, the gym was full of volunteers from 5th through 8th grade. Miss Fluffernutter put music on and ran around listening to suggestions, helping out and getting everyone excited. She loved Dominic's suggestion to make a piñata. Charlotte and Nicole volunteered to help him build the papier-mâché animal. Amy said she'd bring records and be the DJ. Grace and Miss Fluffernutter decided to make daisy chains to run from one room to the other. Bianca sat down to draw posters to hang in the walls. Every once in a while, Dominic would stop his work to chat with Bianca and see if she needed any help. Bianca would always say no, but thanks for asking. The rest of the Roses were slightly alarmed that he had not offered his help to anyone else. You are probably wondering if the world just revolved around the English Roses. Well, sometimes they thought it did, but in fact it did not. Did I mention Bunny Love and Candy Darling? They were twin sisters in the 6th grade. They lived in a house that looked like it belonged to Hansel and Gretel. They'd been tap dancing since they were 5, and by now they were practically professionals. They asked Miss Fluffernutter if they could perform their new routine for the party. Miss Fluffernutter thought it was a smashing idea, and Bunny and Candy practically danced all the way home to tell their mother the news. The week flew by, and every day the English Roses would help Miss Fluffernutter and the other students decorate. Every day, Dominic would stop his work on the piñata and walk over to Bianca's table to sit down and talk to her. Sometimes he told her funny stories about his village in Spain. Every time Bianca laughed, the other Roses felt a little squeeze on their hearts. A tiny tug of indignation, a little prickling of perturbedness. I know that's not a word, but I'm telling the story around here, and I can use any word I want. By the end of the week, the gym looked totally different, but something was different about the English Roses, too. They had stopped asking Bianca if she needed any help at home with her chores, and they kept forgetting to walk with her to school. Bianca was sad and confused. She could see what was happening, but she did not know what to do. She liked Dominic, but she did not want to upset her best friends. Bianca asked her dad what she should do, and he encouraged her to be honest with her friends about her feelings. He suggested that it might be a good idea to ask Miss Fluffernutter for her advice as well. During class, Miss Fluffernutter could tell something was bothering Bianca. After the bell rang, she gave her a big hug and said, "There is no problem that cannot be solved. Let's meet in my office." After the class filed out, Bianca and Dominic were the only ones left behind. Dominic walked over to Bianca's desk, smiled with his beautiful smile, and said, "Would you like me to walk home with you?" Bianca felt nervous and bit her lip. "No, thanks. I have a meeting with Miss Fluffernutter," she replied. Dominic looked a bit disappointed. "Are you going to the dance tonight?" he asked. "Of course I am, silly. After all that work, I wouldn't miss it for the world." "Oh, good," sighed Dominic as he ran out the door. "See you there." In Miss Fluffernutter's office, Bianca noticed several pictures of a man with a very kind face. "Is that someone in your family?" Bianca asked. "Yes," replied Miss Fluffernutter. "That is my husband. He died several years ago, and even though he's no longer with me in the way that I can see him, he is always in my heart." "That's what I say about my mother," said Bianca. "She died when I was little. Sometimes I miss her so much. You must miss your husband, too." "Indeed I do. That's why I decided to try and be happy all the time. Even the things we think are difficult are really blessings in disguise. They are given to us so we can learn lessons from them." "Well, I guess that's why I'm here," said Bianca. "I need to know how to handle a certain situation, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be learning from it." Miss Fluffernutter was all ears. Bianca told her the whole story of the English Roses, how they had been wonderful and kind in the past year, how Dominic's arrival had made them act differently toward her, how they were no longer calling her or coming over to help her with her chores. I see, mused Miss Fluffernutter, sitting and thinking for a moment. Sounds like the big green monster to me, she said. She's a tricky one. She explained that the other girls were not angry with Bianca, but at the attention she was getting. I think I know exactly what needs to be done. Now run along and get ready. Miss Fluffernutter remembered that there were several brothers in the Ferguson house where Dominic was staying. There was Timmy, Terry, and the twins, Taffy and Tricky. That's a real tongue twister if you say it fast enough. Go on, say it fast enough. Timmy, Terry, Taffy, Tricky. Timmy, Terry, Taffy, Tricky. Timmy, Terry, Taffy, Tricky. Timmy, Terry, Taffy, Tricky. How do you think Mrs. Ferguson feels? Now where was I? Oh yes, the plan. Miss Fluffernutter called the Ferguson boys and personally invited them to the dance. She knew they were jolly good fun, and the English Roses would have such a good time with them that they would forget all about Dominic de LaGuardia. No problem at all, Miss Fluffernutter, said Timmy, the oldest boy. We might need to bring our dad to play the fiddle. Would that be all right? Fiddle-dee-dee, exclaimed Miss Fluffernutter. That's the alrightiest thing I've heard in a long time. After Bianca had finished her chores, she looked at her closet for something to wear to the dance, but all she found were sensible skirts and blouses like the one she always wore. That's all right, she said and smiled to herself. I'll tie a ribbon in my hair and wear some new socks. You'll do nothing of the sort, came a voice from out of nowhere. Bianca turned around, and there stood a plump woman with spectacles falling off her nose. She was eating a pumpernickel sandwich. Who are you? Asked Bianca, who, unlike the other English Roses, had never met Fairy Godmother before. I'm your Fairy Godmother, silly. Now look, we haven't got much time. A fairy friend has outgrown this lovely dress, and I'm a little too, well, it's not really my color, is it? I thought maybe you could use it. She handed Bianca a pale pink dress covered with tiny polka dots. It's beautiful, exclaimed Bianca. I don't know what to say. A simple thank you will do, and I'll be on my way, said the Fairy Godmother. I'm a very busy woman, and my services are in great demand. Thank you, said Bianca as politely as she could, and the Fairy Godmother disappeared. Bianca's new dress fit perfectly. It was the prettiest dress she had ever seen. She felt so special wearing it. She kissed her father goodbye and ran out the door to find Grace, who lived next door. Would you like to walk with me to the dance, Grace? She asked her. I guess so, said Grace, remembering that she was supposed to be angry with Bianca. But in her heart, she didn't really want to be. And besides, she thought to herself, she is just so darned nice. Grace swooped out the door, grabbing Bianca's hand. Let's get out of here before we miss all the fun. When they arrived, the dance was in full swing. The gym looked like a beautiful garden had suddenly taken root in it. There were flowers and trees everywhere, and there was even a big swing in the corner. Amy was spinning records, and lots of kids were dancing. Miss Fluffernutter was staying behind a long table that held refreshments and snacks. She was dressed like Heidi from Switzerland, except that Heidi probably didn't own pink high-top sneakers and a long feather boa. When Miss Fluffernutter saw the girls arrive, she went over to say hello to Bianca and Grace. You girls look lovely, she said, beaming at them. So do you, Miss Fluffernutter, Bianca replied. I love your feather boa, Grace added. I'm just itching to dance, said Miss Fluffernutter. I'm going to ask Dominic to spin me around the dance floor. The girls giggled and ran off to find the rest of the English Roses, who were on the other side of the room, laughing and talking to the Ferguson boys. Dominic was quite a spiffy dancer, but all eyes were on Miss Fluffernutter. She was dancing like a whirling dervish. When they'd finished, Dominic came over to ask Bianca to dance, and though she wanted to more than anything, she said no, out of loyalty to the English Roses. The Ferguson brothers grabbed the rest of the girls and hit the floor, leaving Bianca all by herself. Charlotte looked up from the dance floor and noticed Bianca standing alone. She turned and saw Dominic on the other side of the room standing by himself as well. In the blink of an eye, she realized how unfair the English Roses had been to Bianca again. Before Charlotte could do anything about it, Miss Fluffernutter jumped up on stage and announced that there would be 2 special performances. Everyone took a seat on the floor. This time, Charlotte insisted that Bianca sit next to Dominic, which put a very big smile on Bianca's face. It was time for the show to begin. Bunny and Candy had choreographed a tap dance to their favorite song. They were dressed like sailors, and they did everything in unison, splits and jumps and cartwheels and turns. They did it with precision and perfect timing. You couldn't tell one twin from the other. It was very impressive. When the number was over, Miss Fluffernutter was up on her feet again, asking everyone for quiet so the Ferguson boys could begin their jig. The Ferguson boys stomped their feet and clapped their hands and swung each other around by the arms. Pretty soon the whole room was clapping and stomping too. Taffy and Tricky did flips and acrobatics, and Timmy and Terry did some pretty fancy footwork. Old Mr. Ferguson played a mean fiddle. They were quite a family. They got a standing ovation when they were finished. The English Roses had the time of their lives, and they couldn't wait to tell the Fergusons how good they were when they came off stage. Then they congratulated Bunny Love and Candy Darling and asked them to go bowling that weekend. "We'd love to," answered the twins. When the dance ended, the English Roses stayed to help clean up. So did Dominic, and so did the Ferguson boys. So did Miss Fluffernutt's feather boa. It collected more dust than her broom. When all the chairs were stacked and the floor was swept, the English Roses thanked Miss Fluffernutter for a great night. She hugged the girls and reminded them how important it was to cherish one another. "I've got an idea," she whispered. "The next time you start to feel jealous of someone, try to feel happy for them instead. Good things will come your way, too. It will be hard at first, but are the English Roses afraid of a challenge?" "No way," they shouted. "That's my girls," said Miss Fluffernutter, hugging them all. When the English Roses got to the door, Timmy, Terry, Taffy, Tricky, and Dominic were standing in a perfect line waiting to say goodbye to them. "Good night, fair maidens," they said in unison. "Adios, senorita," said Dominic, looking straight at Bianca. And then they all bowed to the English Roses like perfect gentlemen. The girls could not believe it. They waited until the boys left, and then they fell on the floor laughing. No one had ever bowed to them before. The English Roses walked home together arm in arm. They apologized to Bianca for being envious of her because of Dominic. They admitted that they had not been good friends to her. Bianca smiled and said, "I forgive you. We all make mistakes." Then she poked Grace and joked, "And who knows, one day I might act like a twit and you'll have to forgive me too." "Friends for life," they exclaimed. One by one they arrived at their houses. First Charlotte, then Amy, then Nicole, then Grace, and finally Bianca. As she walked to the door of her house, she saw her father waiting for her. "Papa, I had such a good time tonight," she said as he gave her a big bear hug. "That's wonderful," he said. "Tell me about it." "Well, first of all, Miss Fluffnutter is the coolest. Second of all, I learned how to do an Irish jig. And third of all, you can't just love your friends when they are nice to you. That's when it's easy. You have to love them when they are being complete dorks, too. Sooner or later, they'll come around." Bianca's father took her face in her hands and looked at her with so much love in his eyes. He knew her mother would be very proud of her, too. "I'd say that was quite an evening." "Yeah, it was TGTBT," said Bianca, kissing her father on the nose and floating up the stairs to her bedroom. She hung up her pretty new dress and fell fast asleep. The end. So that was The English Roses, Too Good to Be True by Madonna. So you should definitely check this book out. It's lots of fun. All right, so that's all for today. So we'll read to you again soon. Bye!